Driving home one afternoon from a dentist appointment when I decided to take a long way home to head through a backcountry area that's primarily all old native territory. There wasn't much back here, truth to be told, but the scenery was beautiful. That's when I had the sighting of my life happen to me. I almost hit a big black dog. I saw this figure run in front of my car. It was running upright, just like a person, and looked just like a werewolf. I stopped the car and just sat there gaping at it as it ran across the road quickly. I never did see something like that before in my life. I slowly started to move again after it crossed. When I got about 300 yards away from where it crossed, I could see in my rearview mirror that it was looking back and peering its head back out at my vehicle. That dog was huge. It was nearly 8 feet tall, had pointed ears, a long snout, and a huge chest. When it crossed and jumped down the embankment on the road, it let out a growl unlike any I've ever heard. I could feel the vibrations in my body. It was so intimidating. I couldn't stop thinking about this sighting until I reached my house. I told my husband about what had happened, and he told me to never go through that area again, that it was supposed to be a cursed place of dark magic, and that people have gone missing after going to that area. Lots of strange things have gone on in that area, besides just missing persons. Weird loud metallic banging sounds, bright lights at night, figures moving in the sky in the woods. I guess that entire area is a hotbed for UFO sightings and encounters, among even Bigfoot sightings, I guess. My husband, who has grown up here in the area, where I haven't been growing up here, him and his friends avoided that area like the plague because people he knew went through there and turned out missing. Even many of the natives that live around here don't venture through that area much. Just kind of makes you wonder. I probably should have never driven through there, but oh well. I'm kind of glad I did, because had I not, I would have not seen such a marvel of an animal, if you could even call it that. Personally, I don't believe in werewolves or creatures like Bigfoot, but I do believe that there are monsters out there. In fact, I have a story that I could share with you, in which I have an experience with a monster all of my own. It was one night when I was left home by myself playing video games while my parents were out, and a monster, what I would believe to be a monster, tried to break into my house. I use the term monster because that's the only way I know how to accurately describe the way it looked and its behavior. In reality, it closely resembled that of a werewolf, but I try to be logical about it, and I realize that werewolves aren't necessarily real. I personally don't believe that there are people turning into these things under a full moon, but I cannot deny that the thing that I saw that night, that thing, a monster, was most certainly real, and had it gotten into my house like it wanted to, there is no telling if I would still be here today to tell you my story. All around our house we had a yard, and then beyond that, on both sides and the back, was probably about 3 acres of small woods, which then led directly to a neighbor's house. Directly in front of the house was the driveway that led to the road, and on the other side of the road were tall hedges. Had we not had as much privacy, and maybe were closer to the neighbors, just maybe this wouldn't have happened. Anyway, this happened to me when I was 15 and still in high school. I was a freshman, so I believe I was either 14 or 15 actually. My parents went out for a date night, and when they did, they usually did not get back until super late, like after midnight. So I was left at home to play video games and watch TV. You know, stuff that typical teenagers do. Since my parents have a large screen TV in the living room, I think I hooked up my PS3 and was playing games through that. I'll give you a quick layout of our house. As soon as you walk in the front door, the TV is directly to your right, facing your left. To your left is the couch, which faces the TV, and there's a large window perpendicular to the front door. From the outside, if you were to look in this front window, you have full view of the living room, as well as the dining area, which sits back behind the living room. If you're in the living room and you walk past the TV, you can go right down the small hallway, which leads to my parents' room and a small bathroom, and my father's office. If you turn left and go down that way, you go down another small hallway, which leads to my bedroom and a small bathroom. The bedroom is on the other side of the living room. So if I'm in my bedroom and I was facing where the TV is in the living room, there's a wall there. Going back to the living room, as soon as you walk in the front door, directly in front of you is the dining room, and in the kitchen curves inward, blocked by a wall. Now that you kind of know what the house is like, this is what happened. I stopped playing games and I quickly got up to go get a drink of water, and as I'm walking back from the kitchen, I noticed something I didn't before. I see big red eyes peering at me through the window at night. When I saw those eyes, I just lost it. I turned around and I ran, and I locked myself in my bedroom. I was freaking out. I felt like a little kid who had just seen a monster outside. When I went inside though, I started looking through the blinds just a little bit. I didn't want to move the blinds that much because I knew that it knew where I was, so I didn't want to move the window blinds. Then I saw it again. This time, it followed the movement. It followed me to where my bedroom was, and it noticed that I had gone into the next bedroom over and moved over in the front of my window. Because of its big silhouette, this thing must have been around 7 to 8 feet tall. It had a long tail which curled up behind it. I really couldn't believe what I was looking at. I thought to myself it was a werewolf even before I saw it in full. The shape gave it away. Crappy for me, but I had broken my window blinds months ago by wrestling too much with my friends, and I hit it, and my parents never bothered to replace it because they were mad, so they didn't close quite all the way, which meant that this thing had free rein to fully look into my windows right at me, and there was virtually nothing I can do but try and hide out of the way in the corner. I had my light off, and I was hiding in the corner while this thing scanned my room, looking for me. I really couldn't believe what I was looking at. I thought it was a werewolf, even before I saw it in full, just by its silhouette alone. The head and its mane looked just like a werewolf you would see. It looked to be huge, and it stood upright on 2 legs. It was covered in long dark fur, almost like a matted fur, and it had pointed ears just like a dog does. The eyes glowed red, like a deep dull red, and even had a hint of yellow. Its face was what really confused me, because the way it looked totally defied understanding. It leaned in so close to the glass that you could see its breath on the window and the condensation building up. I don't think it could see me, because I turned my light off, but after a few moments, it pulled its head back and walked around to the other side of my house. This thing was heavy, and you could tell that it weighed a lot, because every time it took a step, you could just hear this dull thud on the ground. I jumped up quickly, locked my door, and ran back and sat in the corner, listening intently for whatever this thing was going to do next. I could faintly hear my game, which was paused, and then it was silent for a moment. I kept listening, and then that's when I heard the back sliding glass door rattling. To my horror, this thing was trying to open the sliding glass door to get in the house. It was shaking it harder and harder, more and more violent each time. I began to cry. I was so scared. I left my phone out in the living room, so I had nothing I could do, nobody I could reach out to or call. I didn't know what to do. At the time, it was maybe 9:45 p.m., and my parents wouldn't be home for a few more hours. I had no way to contact anybody, nothing I could do. If this thing broke into the house, I was a goner. It tried and tried at the door for a while, before just stopping entirely. I didn't hear anything anymore after that. I didn't even hear it walk away like I could hear it walk all the way around the house. I still heard my game, which was just a fainted noise, but it was still sitting there paused, just like I had left it. I decided I was just going to sit there and wait until my parents got back. I didn't know how long it was, but eventually, my mother and father came home. It was only around 11 p.m., but felt like I had been sitting there waiting for hours. They got back because my mother has this habit of coming down with terrible migraines, and she wanted to cut their date shorter. When my mother and father came home, my mother got some aspirin, and they were both wondering why I had locked myself in my bedroom with the lights off, when I told them that I thought I heard an intruder trying to break into the house. My father looked at me very strangely and investigated the back door, where I told him that I had heard somebody trying to break in, but there was no signs, no footprints or smudges on the glass. It's like I just hallucinated the whole thing. I know what I saw, and I know what I experienced. I am no fool, and I wouldn't dare tell my parents this because they would never believe me. Now, fast forward in time, I'm in my 20s and currently enrolled in college, and that is still one of the most horrific things. I didn't believe in monsters before that, but I do now, and I know for fact they are real. Back in 2010, I got the chance to go fishing off the coast of South Africa, where I saw the biggest shark of my life. Now, I want to stress to you that I've done cage diving before with great white sharks, and it is terrifying, even though it is a thrill. What I saw in the waters this day was larger than any great white shark that I've ever seen. It also looked vastly different. Great white sharks are very distinctive looking. Most of you, assuming you are sharing this with your readers, will know exactly what a great white shark looks like. They look different than a tiger shark or a goblin shark. The shark I saw had a much more narrow face, and if I'm guessing size here, which I'd be pretty good at, I would say it was anywhere between 30 to 40 feet in length. Its overall body, I believe, was more narrow than a great white shark, because a great white has more girth to it. However, great white sharks, unbeknownst to people who don't have experience with them, aren't these crazed bloodseeker man-eaters like Hollywood portrays them. They're not hostile, really. However, the shark we encountered, this single shark that I've never seen before in my life, acted incredibly hostile. It tried to ram into the boat several times and tried to knock some of us overboard out into the water. At least that's what I sensed. I'm just going to say right now that no, I don't believe this was a megalodon, and no, this wasn't a Jaws scenario where it was out to get the ship. I think we had somehow provoked it and angered it, which I just don't understand how. Tiger sharks are also very aggressive sharks and have a very bad temperament. I'm still just trying to figure out how we provoked this particular shark. I have some things to share about this experience and why it's weird. South Africa happens to be a hotbed of shark gatherings because it is also where, during a certain time of year, there's a mass gathering of sea lions and seals. You might want to fact check me real quick for that, because it might just be one or the other. But either way, it's basically a giant dinner bell for a lot of sharks. So what that means is you'll see a huge congregation of sharks coming to this area certain times of year to feed. And because of that, like us, we were lucky to run into a shark that nobody, at least I, hadn't seen before, larger than any great white I'd ever seen or cage dived with. Fortunately, none of us were in the water at the time of this sighting, and the shark only hung around for maybe 15 minutes at most before going and swimming away. None of us tagged it or touched it. It never tried to jump up out of the water and bite us. Nothing Hollywood happened. I'm not going to sit here and feed you some creepypasta sea monster story like you probably want. I'm going to give you reality and facts because it's what you deserve. Anyway, the second detail that I wanted to share with you is that there is speculation that a megalodon is still in existence. And you guessed it, it's speculated to be living right exactly where we were fishing, the South African coast. I don't know if it's necessarily just because of the food source or if it has to do with the climate. It could be a combination of both. There have been whales and other large sea mammals that have washed up with large chunks taken out of them that are far larger than a great white shark. I don't know if we necessarily saw a megalodon that was potentially an adolescent or a juvenile, which is very possible, but I can 100% truthfully say that none of us have ever seen a shark this size that looks quite like this. You might be disappointed to know that it wasn't a 70-foot behemoth of a shark like megalodons are painted to be, but like I said, it is possible this was just an adolescent of a megalodon. You need to remember that the ocean is a vast unexplored territory, and many things could be living and hiding within it. Hell, in the past 20 years alone, with technology ever increasing, we've discovered hundreds, if not thousands of new species that we never thought possible. Even in the last 50 years alone, we've actually been able to discover more and more fish that dwell at the bottom of the ocean, and sea life forms that we never thought would be possible. The possibilities here are endless when it comes to the sea. I think that's why the concept of sea monsters like large sharks, the kraken, giant squid, are just so intriguing, because the possibility of them existing is actually very real. We can't fully explore all the depths of the ocean, and when so many nooks and crannies for large fish and creatures to live in and hide out, I don't think we'll ever fully know the truth. The last thing I wanted to tell you is that after the few of us on the boat saw the shark, we had a chance to talk to some of the local fishermen, and they too have seen the same species of shark. They had a specific name for it that they spoke about in their native tongue. One of the fishermen that I talked to said these things are very aggressive, and at one point even capsized his boat with him in it. Either way, it would be a terrifying situation to be having your ship just being capsized with a 30 to 40 foot carnivorous predator swimming beneath you. A lifelong friend of mine who has spent years and years in the Navy had some of the wildest stories to tell me about his time out at sea. Everything you can imagine, from weird lights in the sky to dealing with Somalian pirates, and even more hair-raising things you can imagine. One story that he shared with me, though, always gets under my skin because he knows I'm a sucker for sea monsters. In fact, when I first watched the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, my favorite parts were always when they were dealing with the Kraken, because it was just this monstrous, monolithic creature of the abyss. While he has not seen a creature like that in the ocean per se, he does have a story that is eerily not too far off. I'll preface this and say that I am terrible at reciting the story. I'll have to reach out to him and get him to contact you so he can give you the story in full with every detail. So for now, I'll just give you the basics of the story. While on a larger Navy ship, he didn't go into detail what kind of ship they were, but that they had spotted an extremely long animal swimming about 40 meters below the surface. This thing was so large that you could faintly see it through the water. My friend calls it the largest sea serpent that he's ever seen or heard of in his life, and told me this thing far exceeded the length of the boat, and the width was even larger than that of the boat. It had so much force underneath the water that it moved the ship off course and set them off path from this large moving object. He couldn't give me any estimates of how long or wide this creature was, but told me it was a behemoth of a creature. This makes me believe that there is such a thing as a leviathan, if we're talking the size he truly told me. He's not a storyteller by any means, and he was dead serious when he was telling me this. Again, this is in the far South Pacific Ocean, the part of the ocean that also happens to be home to some of the deepest parts, with an average depth of around 14,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And also, the Mariana Trench sits in this part of the ocean as well. It shouldn't surprise me that something so large dwells in that area of the ocean. The sighting, I was told, was also well documented by that ship, so it's on file somewhere. It even freaked the captain out because he had never seen something so large in all of his days in the Navy. This is a true story that really happened to me back in 2006 when I was living near a beach in Florida, a rather small town in between some bigger beach towns. I had just driven back home to Oklahoma to visit and happened to talk to one of my best friends, Joe, into moving back to Florida with me. One night, Joe and I had decided we were going to head down to the beach, bring a couple of beers and some herb, and chill out down by the ocean. It was a nice night. As we pulled up, I remember parking my car in the beachside parking lot. We were listening to Sublime and opening our first beers when I told Joe I was going to go walk down to the beach. I kicked off my sandals and walked down to the ocean. The ocean was flat, waves barely rolling up against my ankles. As I'm standing there, gazing the open ocean, I hear Joe say something as he started walking down the car towards me on the beach. Then, what I can only describe as an ethereal light, blue lane of light, illuminates me. The light creates a lane about 15 feet wide. The light illuminated the sand from the ocean to the top of the beach's sand dune. What struck me as odd was that it wasn't a broadcast light in a V shape from the origin. It was a parallel lane of light. It was illuminating the granules of sand in a way I'd never seen light do before. As it lit me up, I exclaimed to Joe, "What is that?" I began to search for the origin of the light. I didn't see nor hear anything in the sky above, so I focused my attention on the ocean. I could somehow sense that this light was coming from near offshore. I squinted to look for any stern lights, assuming that maybe this was coming from a boat. This was a clear night, and in a clear night off the Florida coast, you can see a boat's lights for miles off the coast into the horizon. I saw nothing. No boats, no shadow outlines along the horizon. Nothing. Still, I could sense that this light illuminating me was coming from a few hundred yards off the beach, still unable to physically see the object. This analysis all happened within a matter of probably 30 seconds as the light illuminated me. The light then slowly dissipated off of me. It then lit up Joe's lane for about 10 seconds, who had now descended the top of the beach and was almost closing in on me. Now he's freaking out. Then the light dissipates off of him and illuminated the lane on the other side of me, where there was nothing. Then, the light behaved in a way I will never forget. It did a rapid shuffle of the 3 lanes in a random fashion. It straight up scanned us. The next thing I know, a huge tidal wave is picking me up off the beach. The wave had to have been 20 feet tall. It picked me up off the ground and threw me face first onto the beach like a rag doll. If you've ever skateboarded, I'm sure you've heard the term scorpioned, where you eat it face first, and your legs wrap up over your head from behind you. Worst case scenario kind of ordeal. That's what happened. Not so gnarly. As I got up, I yelled for Joe. I heard him. He had been washed about 30 yards inland. I walked up to him and said, "Dude, are you okay? What the hell was that?" He was quivering and said, "I don't know, man." Just then, I felt this really creepy, spooky, sixth sense feeling come over me, like we'd just seen a ghost. He felt it too. It was written all over both of our faces. I said, "Let's get out of here right now." So we jumped back into my car and hauled ass back to the house. As we're sitting on the couch in the living room, trying to recount what had just happened on the couch, we must have been talking very loud. My cousin, who'd been in bed sleeping, comes out and says, "Guys, it's 4:30 in the effing morning. What are you guys out here yelling about? I gotta wake up for work in like an hour." He was pissed. Simultaneously, we both began blurting out what we had seen and sounded like we were absolutely insane retelling of what had just happened. He didn't believe us, of course. He asked if we had taken hard drugs or were drunk. We weren't. We'd only both had 1 beer each. Then, as he goes back to his room to go to sleep, I looked over to my friend Joe and said, "Wait, 4:30? We went out there at like 11 and have only been gone for an hour." We both looked at each other with a frightened, spooked look again. The next day, I woke up and had a burn mark around my right eye socket from where the force of the impact on the beach had literally sandpapered what resembled a road rash on my face. I've told myself many things over the years to try and make sense of it. Government helicopters, submarines, tidal wave warning systems. But deep in my gut, I know that Joe and I will never forget, and coincidentally, also never fully remember the time we were possibly abducted by an unidentified, submerged object. I was 20 years old back then, just a pup. I recovered fast, but the older I got, closer to my 30s, the worse and worse my back showed that I wasn't alright. That the tidal wave that scorpioned me up onto the beach had really messed me up. I have to use a back roller and a back massager daily to do physical rehab on myself from what feels like 3 to 4 completely blown vertebrae. It's literally a daily reminder that whatever happened out there on the beach that night in Florida really did happen.